Good morning and welcome to Rising. It's Thursday and we have a great show for you today. Hello, Briahna.
Hello, Robby.
Let's get right into it, I guess.
There's a lot to cover today. Yesterday, the U.S. vetoed a United Nations resolution condemning all violence against civilians in Israel and Palestine. The resolution would have designated a ceasefire for the passage of humanitarian aid through the region. It seems for now, airstrikes will continue. However, yesterday, Israeli President Benjamin Netanyahu relented to allowing foreign aid into the region after urging from President Biden. A senior Israeli official told Axios that during his meeting with the Israeli War Cabinet, Biden explained that the optics of allowing aid would help maintain international support for the IDF's operation against Hamas.
Well, yesterday, massive protests demanding a ceasefire in the region broke out on Capitol Hill. Hundreds of activists for the anti-war groups Jewish Voice for Peace and If Not Now occupied the Cannon House office building in D.C. yesterday before they were detained and led away by Capitol Police. 300 people in total were arrested. Now, before the crackdown on protesters, they were joined outside Capitol Hill by Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. Let's listen to what she had to say.
The majority of Americans are literally against oppression. They're against occupation. They're against human rights violations. If you just tell them the truth, they will be on our side. So we have to speak the truth. When are we going to feel safe? When are we going to stop funding continued literally oppression of indigenous communities? When are we going to say enough? It makes me so angry to have to say it, but I'm telling you, I'm talking to people that literally are like me. They literally believed in this party that was supposed to be inclusive of all of our opinions and our views and our political stance and all of these things. But what is starting to get really clear and very loud is that somehow many of us in this room, because of our political opinions, because maybe our faith is a certain faith, maybe because our ethnicity is a certain ethnicity, that somehow we're subhuman.
President Biden is set to give a primetime address on the conflict in Israel-Palestine tonight. We will, of course, bring you coverage of that tomorrow.
We didn't play it there, but I did want to note that Tlaib also brought up the hospital explosion. And this is she was speaking well after the time period in which we now have more information that U.S. intelligence and Israeli intelligence and the Wall Street Journal have said that the hospital explosion was the work of the non-Hamas group. Yeah. She again said it there in that speech that it was Israel and did not, correct it even when that was pointed out. So a lot of conservatives criticizing her for that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the main rationale for not believing the first initial reports, apart from the things I said yesterday, which is that there was this Israeli comms person who seemed to claim credit for Israel of the attacks. There has been more reporting now out of Channel 4 News that the video that's been put forward by Israel that purports to show two members of Hamas having a conversation about how it was not the IDF's bomb appears to be, by linguists and Arabic speakers, they represent it to be seemingly very like fake, almost as a staged feeling, and that the dialect and the accents are all off. And there's still, I think, a very much an ongoing debate about what happened there. I think that the jury is still out, and part of the other reason that people are very skeptical is because we have had these instances where you have Israel doing an independent investigation, at times with the U.S.'s support or the U.S.'s limited ability to investigate, where they have misrepresented the facts on the ground, including most recently, and I think most prominent in people's mind, the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh, the Palestinian-American journalist, by a member of the IDF in a way that was targeted. And so first the IDF, Israel denied that it happened, denied that it was their person who killed her, and then they said it was in a conflict zone, and then they said, oh, it happened, but it was an accident, and it took many rounds of investigation from outside non-governmental organizations to finally get to the truth of a matter and get an admission. So I do think everyone should make no strong claims about this and just give it a beat. But generally speaking, I wonder what you made of this event. So the activists at the, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
The activists
I'm going to be speaking in greater detail about the hospital issue specifically in my radar today,
Sure.
and we're talking about it more, so we can proceed right now.
So the protesters, there were a large number of them, and they really managed to have a significant effect there at the Capitol. And they were, I think, notably Jewish protesters speaking out against the abuses against Palestinians. I think a lot of folks, both Jewish Americans and some people in Israel, have been pointing out the connection between instances of terror and Israeli deaths and the ongoing occupation, and very much see their fate both in Israel and in the global diaspora and their safety being linked to resolving that conflict in a way that respects the rights and interests of Palestinians. You see all these protests across the Arab world. There were people in Iran, I believe, no, it was in Iraq, chanting, America is the number one devil. And it's precisely because of the perception that America is backing Israel in its occupation and in the continued oppression of Arabs both living in Israel and in these occupied territories. And it was really interesting to see that the response from that, I think Marjorie Taylor Greene and another conservative congressmember were there, started waving the Israeli flag at the protesters, although as though that was some kind of, I don't know what that means. What does it mean to wave an Israeli flag at a bunch of Jewish protesters as a Christian?
I mean, look, I think it is worthwhile, we're doing it to push back against greater U.S. involvement or U.S. involvement at all, because we don't want the conflict to escalate. We don't want to be part of it. The American people don't want to be part of it. I don't know that the kind of rally that Tlaib and others were participating in is obviously they have free speech to do whatever they want. Totally entitled to your opinions. But if we're going to create
the majority of Americans
and like ally with people
against
on the right, because there are some people on the right. We're going to be talking about Vivek talking to Tucker, the voices on the right that don't want greater U.S. involvement and don't want greater U.S. military aid committed. I'm just saying, like, that alliance is going to have to be about it being best for the U.S. to just stay out of it, rather than about, frankly, the Palestinian cause being more righteous or whatever than because the sympathies of the American people, I mean, we read those poll numbers, right? The American people are much more broadly sympathetic to the Israeli position. So I think the best argument is going to be on what's good for the U.S.
Well, I don't know
against getting
I don't know that
involved.
Jewish people who are protesting there, who are concerned about
But they're the extreme minority. They are.
Okay, well, they're the ones that are there protesting, and they're worried about a moral claim and their own personal safety. So I don't think that it's going to be particularly appealing to them to say, well, drop that cause, don't talk about that. They're the ones that are ultimately going to be targeted. Along with the rest of us, frankly, because as you raised the other day, explicitly in Osama bin Laden's letter explaining why he bombed the World Trade Center, why 9/11 happened, was because of the ongoing oppression of Palestinians. Now, you can say that that's not a root issue and that we can keep ignoring it, but how many people have to die? Not that it's justified, but how many people have to die because so many people are upset about this oppression? And hearing it specifically from Jewish voices, who are the ones that are in the crosshair, I think really is powerful. I don't want to skip over the news about the U.S. vetoing a resolution condemning all violence against civilians in Israel and Palestine. Now, you would think, wouldn't you, a UN resolution saying violence against civilians is bad is an easy sell. So why would the U.S. veto a resolution like this?
I think they did not like that the statement did not contain the assertion that Israel has the right to defend itself, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So Lindsey Thomas Greenfield gave a statement afterwards saying exactly that because the statement didn't literally contain the phrase, Israel has a right to defend itself, the United States of America took the position that it would veto a resolution to say violence is bad, violence against civilians specifically is bad. What is that? What is going on here?
I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter much. It's just a UN resolution.
Well, I think
guess.
it does have some broader implications.
I mean, because Biden did anyway go and talk to Netanyahu and convince him to reverse course on the humanitarian aid, which is a good limited first step, not nearly enough, but
right. But it doesn't. That's not a prohibition against the continued bombing of Gaza. And that's what the tipping point has been. That's the central issue here. People who have defended Israel's actions long after proportionality has gone out of the window, more than twice as many Palestinian civilians have now been killed as Israeli civilians were tragically killed in the events of October 7th. So at this point, people are asking, you've been bombarding the Gaza Strip for a week and a half now. You have dropped more, 6,000 bombs, more bombs in a week, in the first week of bombing than America dropped on Afghanistan in like the first year of war. When does this end?
But the point was not to have some kind of proportionality or to like kill as many people as Hamas killed. The point is to eliminate Hamas.
Well,
and they're not
I'm glad you said
so
that. I'm glad you said that. So from a humanitarian, that's Israel's standing, but the United Nations is now tacitly endorsing that project, which it's not eliminating Hamas, it's eliminating overwhelmingly civilians, which is a war crime and a violation of the standards that the UN is supposed to uphold. So this is a really interesting position where basically the real reason, if you read through the between the lines, it does seem like the United States and the UN, because it's subject to our veto power, refuses to put any limits on Israel's killing of civilians. As long as the initial pretext is that we're going after Hamas, the ratio of civilians to Hamas doesn't seem to be weighing in at all.
It's not a pretext. They are going after Hamas. They've killed Hamas leaders. They're trying to ferret Hamas out of their positions. As
long as there is even one Hamas member, if the standard is, as it seems to be, given the United States unqualified support of their right to defend itself, which means bombing this civilian population, which is 50% children, without any real conversation about what is worth it in terms of loss of civilian life, that is basically a carte blanche to say as long as Hamas exists, we can basically exterminate this civilian population, which is why there's so many conversations about whether this is a genocide and an ethnic cleansing, especially given there's already, of course, last week, the order to evacuate the whole top half of the country, meaning 1 million people displaced internally.
The reality is the U.S. was not going to allow the UN to put some limit on Israel's right to go after Hamas. What we could do is just stop funding it. That's what I would like, rather than perform a declaration one way or the other.
I just really want people to sit with this, sit with what it means for the U.S. to veto a resolution condemning all violence against civilians. What kind of position that puts us in the world, broadening it out to the conversation we were just having about how we're perceived, the America as a country is perceived in the context of the world as, frankly, the number one devil, as we were described by those Iraqi protesters. This is a tough one, obviously. We're going to stay on this issue, but stick around for a lot of other good rising content coming up next.